Okay, today my guest is Diana Sutherland from the Sutherlin Group in New Jersey, specifically Jersey City, Hoboken, and up the Gold Coast. Now, let me tell you more about Diana. Now, prior to a career in real estate, Diana Sutherland produced sales training programs for Fortune 500 companies for nearly 2 decades. Her expertise in every area of sales, along with a background in interior design, led her to a career that incorporated all aspects of her unique and invaluable background, culminating in a sales volume of 18 million in her first year as a real estate agent. That's an incredible number, as we all know. Now, Diana and her team are distinguished Gold Coast agents that offer truly hands-on full service sales and tailored marketing services. She's partnered with developers since 2005 and has been the top selling new construction and waterfront agent for 18 years. She gets chosen by developers. We're going to talk to her about that as well. Some of her projects have included 77 Hudson, Gulls Cove Phase 1 and 2, Trump Plaza, Crescent Court, 25 Senate Place, Hamilton Square, and Lofts 222. Diana has received platinum level awards for the past 13 years from the NJAR Circle of Excellence, which is the New Jersey Association of Realtors, and the Triple Platinum Award 4 years in a row at her previous brokerages. She closed on the highest priced waterfront condo in New Jersey history in 2017 and continues to break her own records on top selling brownstones in Jersey City. Please, everyone, follow Diana. Visit her website. I'm a big fan of her website, sutherlingroup.com. That's SUTHERLIN group.com. We will have a link to that in the show notes. And please follow her group on Facebook and Instagram, which is Sutherlin Group. And we'll have a link to those as well in the show notes. Diana, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for the very lovely introduction.
Well, I love doing introductions for people because it is always so astonishing to me about how our guests have really just accomplished so much in oftentimes in a short amount of time. And I know you're not new to the business, but even in your first year to do 18 million is really impressive. I know it's not your first year in the business any longer. However, you have only gone up from there. So I am super excited to hear about how you've done that, and also, what your overall philosophies are working with clients. I know you have certain thoughts of how you have grown your business that we're going to explore. But the first thing I always like to know is how you got into real estate. You were a sales trainer prior to that, but walk us through how you moved from being a sales training, program sort of person to working in sales directly.
Okay. I ran a company for almost 20 years, and I trained Fortune 500 companies in sales, all aspects. Reading body language, overcoming objections. I loved working with people. I loved drawing people out. I used to have to interview CEOs and high level executives on camera, and they'd be so nervous. And I just took pride in the fact that I would put them at ease. I'd ask the right questions. I just loved people skills. And I did that for a long time. Sometimes we like to reinvent ourselves. I went back to get my interior design degree because I had always been buying properties, fixing them up, selling them, and so forth. And I loved design. So I was just about ready to get my degree in interior design. And my girlfriend said to me, and I still had my other company. I'm very much a workaholic. So my girlfriend said to me, "Why don't you get your real estate license?" And I'm like, "Oh, maybe I could do that part time." And she goes, "Diane, I don't know what you do part time. You do nothing part time." I'm like, "No, I can." So I still had my other company open, and I was doing programs for very big corporations. And I thought, well, I'll just do this, on the side. And I sold over 18 million in my first year. I won rookie of the year for the northern region. I was of New Jersey. It was just crazy. And I thought, why didn't I? It was sort of taking all my skills working with people, my sales skills, and my design skills. And I thought I should have been doing this years ago. So I just fell in love with it. And I worked my butt off. I mean, I took, I always tell this story, but it's really the truth. I took 2 days off my first year.
Wow.
Mother's Day and Christmas, and that's it. And people laugh about it all the time. I mean, it really was 2 days, but it's probably where I should have been all along. But all of those other things sort of led me to this.
Yeah, well, you clearly had the skills that you were training to different sales organizations to allow you to really flourish so quickly. And on top of having not just a job, but running a company
Yeah.
and then doing 18 million. And I suspect it wasn't one transaction for 18 million. It
No,
probably was a lot
no,
of
a
transactions.
lot of transactions. And I didn't even realize what I was doing. I was just sort of doing it, doing it, doing it. And I used to do in my first year, I would get out there. I did like 3 open houses a week. Every single week. I was like, oh, and I loved it. And I was learning it. And I was realizing that I was taking all these things that I had learned about communication skills, some of which actually came from a former lifetime, a different. I started many years ago in Manhattan. I was living there, and I was an actress, and I still attribute some of the most important tips that I learned in every business that I've been in to what I learned in the acting world. Not that you're acting or putting on a show, but that I studied an acting technique that is very famous in New York, but it forces you to focus on the other person, to listen to the other person, to react to them, hyper focused. Um, and I took that into some of the sales training that I did. So many people are so self conscious. They want so badly to impress and show that I'm the market expert or I'm this or that. They're not really paying attention to the person sitting in front of them. And, so that was really big part of what I think that fed into my skills almost more than anything else.
It's
Yeah.
interesting it's interesting that you mentioned acting because, and I don't know, where you studied. I was trying to think what are the, I do know like there's the Strasberg technique, there's
Mhm.
Uta Hagen, there's a bunch of I'm not an actor, but so my knowledge is very limited, of course, but that sort of training is so interesting because as somebody who's not an actor, I think about what do actors really have to do while they have to memorize. And you're right, though, there's that whole other component that I don't think about when I watch actors perform on TV or theater, which is listening to the other actors and making adjustments along the way so that it does seem like a connected experience. And I imagine that's a really important skill set, especially when you're sitting across the table from someone maybe who hasn't worked with you before as client, as a real estate client, and now is trusting you with a
Right,
very sizable purchase or sale.
right. It's interesting because a couple of the things that you mentioned are I had studied a couple of different of the biggest techniques. Some of them actually make you more self-conscious. And I can, as an analogy, um, an actor can sometimes be so self-focused that
Sure.
they're actually standing outside of themselves watching their performance. It's
Sure.
very self-conscious. And this was actually called the Meisner technique. And some of
Okay.
the best teachers in New York teach it to this day. But it was all about focusing on the other actor, completely taking the focus off of yourself.
Wow.
And there's something that I always, there's a little story. I want to throw in a little tidbit because I always, whenever I am training actors on my actors, and whenever I'm training agents on my team, I always tell them this story. There was a great audition book in New York that every actor, it was their Bible, and it was called Audition by Michael Shurtleff. And he talks about how self-focused actors are, and that they can go into an interview, they can do this, they are so nervous about making a good impression, proving they're the one that's right for this job, that they're not even listening or paying attention to the person across from them. And he told a story about how he was doing an audition up at the Ansonia Hotel in New York years and years, and we're going back a lot of years. And he said, I saw 360 people that day. I think that was the number. And he said, I walked out of the day, locked the office, walked across Broadway, and here coming towards me is one of the actors that I had auditioned. And he said, I waved at him and I said, oh, hi, whatever. He looked at me like he had no clue who I was. And
Right.
he said, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I saw 360 people that day and I recognized
He
him.
remembered him. Yeah.
Saw one and he didn't recognize me. And I've never forgotten that, because when people sit in front of you, I mean, one of the things that I love about working with people, and some of this had to do with personality assessments that I used to teach and I studied and so forth, but they're all types of people and they're all types of buyers. If you Some of them are very aesthetically motivated. They'll walk into a home and they absolutely, I love the wallpaper. I could just, they're emotionally connected to the home. There, I could see my family sitting in this breakfast room looking out the window, and the cardinal sitting in the tree, is right outside the window. And and that is a very different personality type than the one who's very analytical. What has been the value increase in the last 5 years? Where do you see this going? Show me a spreadsheet, show me the comps. And sometimes you will have a couple you'll have one of each of
Sure.
this personality type, and they're vastly different. And you have to assess very, very quickly, who are you talking to?
Yep.
What is their motivation? What is their trigger? What are their buttons? And really, really pay attention. If you're trying to prove to them how great you are, you're not paying attention. That takes real focus. And sometimes you'll sit there in front of a couple and you'll have to pivot between those two communication styles, but you have to do it, otherwise you can see them glaze over. You're lost, it's done. And
Yeah.
I love
It's
that,
yeah.
that's part of it.
Thank you. That is such an important thing to, I was thinking as you were talking, trying to think about myself. I'm not a practicing agent, but I talk to agents all day, and a lot of my what I do is recruit agents. So
Right.
it's a similar sort of thing, because agents want different things from different brokerages. But what you said is so important, because oftentimes, and even on this podcast, I can be very self focused. I'm listening, but I'm really more thinking about what's the next thing I have to say, so that
Right.
there's not a lull in the not with you necessarily, but
Right.
with other people sometimes. And I realize I'm totally out of this conversation. I know what I'm going to say next, and that's good. But it's only because I'm afraid that if I focus in on this other person and really connect with my client or my podcast guest, then I'm not going to know what to say going, once there is a break in the conversation. And the reality of it is, I'll have probably a much better connected thing to
Absolutely.
say by paying attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I think so many people overlook that piece of it. Um, even open houses, I always have my young agents shadow me, and I'm like, if you don't start asking questions the minute they walk in the door. Oh, hi. Do you live in the neighborhood? Oh, where are you coming from? And get in a conversation, draw them out. You're thinking of maybe moving across the Hudson to Jersey City or to Hoboken. If you don't engage and ask those questions, you have to treat it almost like a mini buyer's consultation. If you don't, it's a complete wasted opportunity. I've been
Yeah.
in so many houses where agents will just sit there and, oh, could you sign in, please? And, they don't want to bother them or be in their hair, so they let them wander around, or they spend so much time. And I used to teach product knowledge, so I love passionately talking about finishes. I love that. And I was in design, so that's exciting to me. But that's only a piece of it. So much of it is, who is this person? People want to work with who they connect with. You don't have to sit there and go, I sold X amount last year. That's not what does it. It's who you connect with. Did they hear me? Everybody wants to be seen and heard. And always, I kind of inherently knew that, but I always teach my agents that it's a mini buyer's consultation, you know and they'll
What
remember you.
Yes, because you'll be the one where they feel, "Wow, this person understands me,
Right.
and they were listening," and you already have if you wanted to, for example, because how successful you've been, you could just rattle off all of your accomplishments, and maybe there's a small percentage of people that would be like, "I just wanna be entertained, I want somebody to
Right.
razzle dazzle me,"
Right.
and maybe that would work, but the vast
Right.
majority of us wanna feel, as you said, heard, seen. And
Yes.
I was thinking
Yes.
about this last night, and I'll give you this sort of unusual or a Monday night. So I was not. It doesn't matter what night. Anyway, I was getting. I was at this this place called Stretch Lab where they stretch you out, and they just opened one in my neighborhood, and so I was doing an evaluation because I'm very inflexible. Anyway, and the reason I'm mentioning this is when they stretch you out. It's a very intimate sort of physical act where, like, there's this woman stretching me out, and she's kind of on top of me and touching me in a very professional way, but also kind of an intimate, vulnerable place.
Wow.
And it was I had kind of a weird reaction to it, not a negative reaction, just like I felt very connected to this person. And I go, and even though I just met them and there was,
Yeah.
this was just her
Yeah.
job and she was stretching me out, but it
Yeah.
was interesting. And I felt like, oh, the reason why I feel so connected to this person is she's touching me in a very professional, platonic way, but
Right.
touching me, and I'm a single person. I don't have a lot of touch in my life, and I
Right.
go, oh, so I'm holding on to this, going, this feels very satisfying, and it reminded me of being heard and seen. People have the
Right.
same sort of reaction when they actually feel heard or seen,
Yeah.
or in my case, I had got touched, and that was very fulfilling. Even though that wasn't the intention I was going for there, I was really just going to get stretched out. But I went, oh, it reminds me, oh, I missed touch. And so this idea of being heard and seen and really like I recognize you is so critical. And it kind of
I agree.
flies in the face of old sales techniques of objection
Uh,
and coming up with a way
yeah.
to overcome. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because I have always told my team, if you're in this only for the money, forget it. People know. They know when you're trying to sell them. And what's so funny is I actually cannot stand salespeople.
Me too.
And I'm like, I go into car dealerships and
Oh,
I get angry. I get
I
so
do too.
angry. And the fact is, it's so funny because in the very beginning of the business, I have such an aversion to that, and I'm so authentic. I like to really authentically connect with people, and I will never forget saying to this friend of mine, I just can't. People are telling me, close them, close them, close them, and I'm like, I can't think that way, because it makes me feel like I'm pushing somebody, I'm selling them. And my girlfriend said to me, but Diana, that is so the opposite of you. And you are only helping them to achieve what they came to you to do. And I thought, wow. And something clicked in my head. I actually said that to one of my agents on my team recently. She's like, I always have this hesitation that I don't want to be the salesperson. I said, but they came to you for this help. You are making, literally, I know it sounds corny, but it really is a dream come true in their life.
Yeah.
And the fact is, if you come from a place of wanting to do that and wanting to serve in that way, it will always come back to you, because people know it. They
Yeah.
know when you're sincere. So I really believe for young agents or newish agents, don't worry about this one sold more than I have. That one's done whatever. Be authentic.
Yeah.
Care about the people in front of you and come from a place. Yes, you have to have absolute knowledge of your market, definitely. But I know so many people that have tons of knowledge of their market and they're really good at all the coaching techniques and closing, closing, closing. There are a lot of people who don't respond to that. They can feel the antennae go up right away and they can just sort of feel that they're being sold,
Yeah.
and so you have to trust that if you know your market, and you're sincere and you really have in your gut the desire to help people, it's going to come across.
And I always think too, I agree. And for anyone listening who is newer to the business and doesn't know everything yet, which of course is a lot of us, I always say, have this kind of this little phrase, or you might even have a better one, Diana. Because I'm not out there in the trenches like you and our guests, but I always like this phrase, and I tell it to our agents as just as something to keep in mind. But you might even have a different suggestion. But if you don't know the answer to something, always have, especially if you're new and you're not going to know the answer to everything. I always say have this expression, which is just say, that's a great question. I want to double check with my team because I want to give you a really complete answer. So bear with me while I check, or I'll get back to you in an hour or next day or whatever. But it's okay to be, again, authentically say, I don't know, I'm going to find out. And that's what a consultant does. I mean,
That's
consultants get
right.
paid a lot of money to say, I don't know, I'll find out, I'll come back to you.
And let me tell you, I've been in this business a while, and there are constantly things I don't know. And I always say that because they will value that. The client will appreciate that. Absolutely. And if you try to fudge it, they'll know.
Yeah.
I think they'll know. Or worse yet, they'll find out you
Yeah,
didn't.
they'll look it up and say, "Oh, she doesn't know what she's."
And I've seen agents do that. They'll throw out an answer and they don't know what and I'm standing in front of them and sometimes I'm like,
Yeah,
you don't want
yeah,
to correct the agent, but at the same time you don't want them to get sued either, so
right.
but I am constantly in that position. I think the day we stop learning, I work with a lot of developers, and there are things that are on such a high level that I can't possibly know. It's going to be an environmental attorney who might have the answer to that. There's always going to be things I don't know. So, so that's a perfect answer. It's a
Yeah.
perfect answer. I can't improve on that.
Well, thank you.
Can't improve on that.
I think this idea of listening is so important. And yes, I do acknowledge that it can be scary to, again, when we're sitting there in a presentation, buyer seller presentation, where we're like, I try to win the business, and I just want to say these things, and also then recognize when we're getting a little bit outside of ourselves, maybe,
Right.
this sort of third person looking in, going, what's the next thing I'm going to say or he's going to say, then going back in and saying, focus on the person.
That's right.
And if you practice your pitches, that information will be there anyway when you need it. But
Absolutely.
and I'm curious too, when you are in a buyer or seller presentation, and let's say it's not, a slam dunk referral or a previous client, somebody
Mm,
who's new to you that you have to win over,
right.
in some capacity, and you talked about really listening to them. What are
Yeah.
some of the things you're listening for? I'm just curious what you're trying to assess.
You want to find out, number one, what their motivation is. Why are they buying? Why are they selling? What are their fears? What are their fears and objections? Because and I used to teach this all the time. You can't overcome an objection unless you know what it is. So, so many stores, say, listen, if a customer's unhappy and they don't come up and complain, they're not coming back and they're going to tell 10 other people. You always want to suss out what are your questions and your fears about this particular property, or find out as much information about Are they both on the same page? Do they both seem to want to get, I get a lot of couples. One wants to go to the suburbs, the other one hates the suburbs. So you kind of, and sometimes for sellers, it will take me 2 or 3 years to get that listing because they're not ready to sell yet. They're still in that kind of, so you sort of feel and you hear both of them. You let both of them kind of verbalize what their hesitancies are, what are the pros and cons. I think it's, the who, how, what, and why. You want to know, why are they selling. Sometimes they won't tell you, but often they will. And you've got to understand motivations. And I think you have to understand motivations and fears, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and what's their passion, what would make them really, really happy, so you
Yes.
can try to zero in on that.
And that's really important because you just said something really important. What would make you really, really happy? Because for some people, it'll be just get highest and best price.
That's
If I'm selling a property, I don't care. Or if I'm buying, give me the lowest and best.
Yep.
And then other people, if they're selling a property, they go, well, I obviously want to get as high a price as possible. But what's really important is that the family that's coming in seems to have some appreciation for what we've done here and what we've, the improvements we've made. I just want a good family in here or a good, whatever. That sometimes rises even above the level of here's what you're going to get for it,
Oh, yeah,
and knowing that is really
true.
critical.
Well, they feel appreciated. This home, particularly if they were emotionally attached to it, if they put some of their heart and soul into it, somebody walks in and they emotionally love it, that can go a very long way. I think that can be super important to some people. And there was something else I was thinking about buyers that had to do with that. Now it's escaping me. I might remember in a minute.
Sure.
But yeah, for sellers, that's very important. Um,
Well, I have a question for you while you're thinking because
oh,
I
I'm
am
trying to remember. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Just interrupt me at any time if it comes in. I was curious because you had said something about, sometimes I have a consultation, whether it's buyer or seller, or you give the example of seller in this case, where they're not really ready to sell, and maybe 2 or 3 years, goes by before they actually list with me. I am curious because connection is so important to you. How do you stay in touch with them in between those times, right? So you have your consultation, you realize they're really not ready at this moment, but I want to be their person when they are ready. So
Right.
how do you stay in touch with them? What are some of the things you and your group do to make sure they don't feel like, oh, Diana forgot about me?
Right. That's a tough one because I I have had so many clients over the years and I try my best. I will 100% admit I am not the best person at mining my database. If I had to say there was, and that's one of the most important things, I do it as much as I can. But I part of the day I work with a lot of developers, and which is fabulous, fabulous. But part of the downside of that is it takes a lot of time and focus. And so we are constantly, like, I have a newsletter that we're doing, constant things. I do a lot of press things, so I'll send it to them. Not sure if you saw this article, whatever. I'll try to reach out if I, remember certain sports events that their kids are in or things like that. I'll always try to do that, but I could definitely be better at that. It's funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. So much of my business has been past clients and referrals from past clients that I've honestly never been a cold caller. I'm not as great as I could be. And I think, with the, calling my database all the time, my, sphere. And I was telling somebody the other day because she said, "My God, Diana, if you did that, can you even imagine what your business would be?" Which is true, and I'm trying to get better at that. I know what I was going to say. I just what I was going to say. I had a developer years ago, and I've never forgotten it because it was such a great compliment. And I wasn't even that long in the business, but I was representing his building. And he watched me so much with different buyers. And he said, you have the most uncanny ability to listen to a buyer and almost immediately know exactly the home that's right for them. Like, exactly. He
That's
said,
like the best, by the way, that's like the best compliment you could
"Oh
ever
my God,
hear.
I
It's
couldn't believe
amazing.
it." And when he said that to me, I've never forgotten it. It made me feel so good. And he goes, "How do you do that?" And I was like, "I listen. I pay attention." And literally, it was true. It was almost immediately people would come to me, and even if and I'd show them something, even if I showed them 10 more things, it was that one that I told them they were gonna fall. I knew what they would fall in love with, you know? And I love that, and I've never forgotten that, and it was very early, in the business for me. But anyway, that was what I wanted to.
No, it's so important. I think about this a lot, and people on our listeners are probably sick of hearing me say it, so I apologize. But because a lot of you have heard this before, but if you're new, maybe you haven't. Which is, I have this like fantasy when I think about the service professionals in my life for different industries, accountants, financial advisors, attorneys, whatever, anyone that's giving me personal trainer, anyone that's helping me in my life somehow. And my fantasies are always like, I want that phone call, which never comes. But I would love the phone call, and I'll just pick on my account, who I adore. She's the best, and
Yeah,
she's wonderful. And I'm not picking on her really, but and she's got a million clients. If I were her only client, she'd probably
right.
do this. But I have this fantasy that she would call me up one day and just go, I was just thinking about you. I have this new idea. This happened to me just the other day at the hair salon. I had to get my hair cut, and the person I get my hair cut, same person for like 15 years. She goes, I have an idea, and I was like, I don't even want to hear it. Just do it, because
Yeah.
this is what you do. And I love the fact that you were thinking about me outside of, like, I don't expect anyone to think about me ever. But when you hear it, it does feel like, wow, someone's thinking about me. They want to, doctors. This is where I have found, as I've gotten older, I love having good doctors, because a good doctor for me will come in and say, hey man, you're doing really well, or you're not doing well, or hey, I've been really watching you for the last few years. Here's, just feeling like my doctors care about me is really important. And I think realtors obviously, demonstrate care through listening and really understanding the client needs.
Yep. And also, if you there's a couple of things that I made certain to do back when the horrible market crash. And I have to tell you, it was like trial by fire. I
Oh, sure.
represented 4 developers during that period.
Oof,
Oh my God, it was brutal. It
that's
was
tough.
brutal. But for my resale clients that would call me in and they'd be like, what's my home worth? What am I going to do? I convinced so many of them not to sell. I convinced so many of them not to sell. And I was like, I had these single mothers who had one child, they were raising all their net worth was in
Ugh,
that home, all.
scary. Yeah.
And I was like, "Is there any way you can hang on? Do you have to move right now? And if you do, can you rent it for the time being?" My broker at the time was yelling at me, "You're supposed to be getting listings." I said, "You know what? I got to sleep at night." And guess what? Not only did they come back to me when they were ready to sell, making a couple of 100,000 more than they would have. Thank you very much. But they also referred me 5 other people.
Of course.
And because they knew, if all you're doing is following the money, I know agents who put people in the worst positions they could have been, sold, single fragile women out in very, areas they shouldn't be living in, that were a bit dangerous because the commissions were 5% co-broke, some new development out, far away from it. And I can tell you, never, and I've said to my team always, you sell that person what's right for them. I don't care what they're paying out.
Yep.
because it's going to come back to you 5 times over. It really will.
One way or the other, good or bad, it'll come back to you.
It will come
So,
back to
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Absolutely. You
Uh,
know,
I would be remiss if I didn't, because I know our audience is frothing at the mouth to hear, and I know and I'm going to disappoint our listeners, some of our listeners who are like, I want the fast track to working with developers, and there isn't most
yeah,
likely these
yeah.
days. However, I would love for you to share any guidance that you might have, maybe with team members that are on that you work with, or just agents in general, if they wanted to start heading down that I want to be on the short list of
Okay.
developer agents that developers choose, because
Right.
you are the developer queen
I
of
am.
New
I
Jersey,
am.
and
That's true.
that
Yes.
is
Yes.
it really is such an amazing feather in your cap,
Yeah.
because you are chosen and you have earned that spot. And I am curious on what you might suggest to agents who want to start to go up that mountain.
So I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. Sometimes you might want to put yourself, in a position where of learning, where you got to learn. There's no way you're ever going to have the knowledge of what they need without being exposed to it. And sometimes that might be being on a team for a while. For some agents, it's working in a sales center, a leasing office, something for another organization. You learn so much from that. And I was very, very fortunate. I started working with developers from 2 months into the business,
Wow.
and they saw what I was just smaller. I worked with a smaller developer that was doing a lot of, boutique style properties, and I was selling them, and my banners were all over. And then K Hovnanian, which is a huge developer, approached me to do a project, and then another big one came out of that. And then, of course, I got to be kind of known in that area. I did have a lot of skills that were very unique. I had the sales skills, but I also had the design skills. And now,
Got it.
um, you know, it, you have to show your value. And some of that is, like, you talk about market knowledge of a market. I don't just have knowledge of a market by resale comps. I have to go out and really do spreadsheets and do a deep, deep, deep dive for the developers, the demographics of certain areas, this and that, all kinds of things. And start small. Start working with, like I did, a small developer. You can't imagine what can possibly come out of that. Um, if you have any kind of skills in terms of, I do staging also. If it's, I have several, storage, people are screaming at me all the time on my team, you're buying more, but the thing is, I love even the light staging, which is, can make an enormous difference. If I need, I've got furniture. If I had to do 3 brownstones at a time, I wouldn't have enough, so I would bring in a staging company. But I love to do it because it's a creative, part of what I do. I still get to play with all of that. But even things, be aesthetically aware, hone your skills in that. Even accessories, I can't tell you how much accessories will transform a space. Artwork, gorgeous throw pillows. I mean, I deal with, I get challenged very often with some very plain, bland kind of places that are, and the bedding's looking. I will literally transform the space just with bedding, throw pillows, artwork. And people come in and they're like, oh my God, I can't. And I do that even for some of my smaller developers. So I think try to hone your skills in that way. But I think being under the wing, or the umbrella of another company where you're going to learn. I know other agents who've worked on sales teams, You learn so much that way, so much. And interestingly, some of those marketing companies hire newer agents. Sometimes you're on a salary with just, a small bonus on each unit. I I I represented some developers during the down market that I made brand new buildings, 414 unit building, and so forth, made very, very little because it was a broker outreach. That's where it kind of started, which was to drive the broker community to the
Sure.
building. And I was sometimes it'd be like, oh my God, I'm working so hard and there's so little return on this. That has been an annuity that has paid me to this day
Wow.
because I sold units and then I've resold them. And sometimes I've sold the same unit 3 times. But after all these years, I got known in these buildings. I got known by the developers, you know. Um, but just keep in mind, it's a lot harder than it's. I don't want to discourage anybody. You have to have a certain temperament for it because
You're serving many masters when
many
you're
masters.
yeah.
And not only that, whatever, if you have a client that's nervous and things have been on the market too long or they're what, imagine if that's times 300.
Sure, yeah. You're gonna deal with some
They
some
can be
stressful
very,
conversations.
some stressful, and you're literally under fire. And it's like, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
And you've got to constantly keep coming up with ideas. When the market crashed, we had to come up with things like, let's do a trip to Paris in addition to their good commission for the next sale. Let's, what, you've got to think out of the box and go to other properties, visit as many of the competing types of properties as possible, you know?
That's brilliant. That is something that nobody out of 500 episodes I think has ever said about working with developers is
Yeah.
go study other developments and
Boy,
what
you
works, what
better.
doesn't work, and bring that to a developer. Say, "Hey, I've been noticing around because they all know the other projects that are
Yeah.
out there. I
Yeah.
like this, I don't like this, etc."
You got to shop them.
Yeah.
If you don't shop them, you don't know what your competition is. And you think it's important to know competition up the street for your house. You better believe it's really important to do because there's nobody that looks at one building. They're going to go to all of them. So what can you do to stand out,
Love that.
And what are they offering? If suddenly they're throwing in window treatments, if they're doing this, you must stay on top of it. See their product, know how their product compares to yours, whether it's a 3 unit building, a 200 unit building, shop that product,
Oh,
so
such
very important.
amazing advice. I would also like to ask, and this is a I think a can be a trickier question because you have so much success over the years. People oftentimes see somebody at your level and think, "Oh, she's got it made. She's got," and obviously, I know from talking to so many hundreds of agents, top agents over the years, that they're working just as hard usually today as they were when they started. But a lot of times, people listening think, oh, this must be, Diana's not affected by the ups and downs of the market because she has all of this, business built in because she's been so successful for so long. But obviously, you struggled just as any other agent does. Market conditions affect you. This is, we're 2023, a little bit of more than halfway through the year. Look, we the reality of it is inventory is down in most markets. Of course, rates are still high. This is a not the easiest time to work with buyers.
Right.
Certainly not the easiest time really working with sellers either. It's maybe easier to sell a property, harder to get the next property. So it is a tough time right now. And what are you doing, or what are you coaching your team to do to stay motivated, to stay productive? Like, what are some of the activities you're doing right now?
Well, we have an unbelievable lack of inventory where we are. Incredible lack of inventory. But back, there are so many buyers that are really nervous. They're like, this is just in the beginning of when the interest rates started going up. I heard over and over and over again, um, this is just like 2009, 2010. This is the opposite.
Thank
At least
goodness.
we are, at least where we are at that time. And the reason I worked with so many developers, and this was in downtown Jersey City, there were high rises going up galore. They were condo buildings. They were all just starting sales. They had to fill up those entire buildings, and the market crashed. That was an oversupply and an under demand. What we have now is the opposite. We have we have a huge demand, very little supply. We've got so many people coming out of New York right now, and what I try to do is you have to pivot with any market. If I think you've got to see what's going on. You've got to anticipate where this is going. People don't want to sell because why are they going to leave you know, under 3% mortgage, interest rate to
But
go
that's
into
the
a
tough sell.
7? It's a very tough sell. So, you've got to find ways. Talk to loan officers. What can we do to help? Some of my sellers, it's like, will they offer a 2-1 buy down? You'll buy the interest rate down for the first 2 years, 1% for the second year, and then it goes to what, with the understanding that many people are doing arms right now, or they're planning to refinance. A
Yep.
lot of people. Talk to mortgage people, talk to everybody that you can to find out what's going to help me move this product.
So
If it's for a seller,
So
for a
you're saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pause you, but I only want to because you just said something very, very profound, and we're gonna get to the buyer in
yeah,
just a moment. I don't wanna, I apologize for jumping in here, but, you said something very important, which was get creative, but you don't have to
yeah,
have the answers, but you have to have a good team. So
that's right,
reach out to the loan officers and say, "Hey, this person." Look, loan officers know nobody wants to go from 3% to 7%
right,
mortgage. I don't
right,
wanna do that, you don't wanna
right.
do that, but sometimes there are sellers that can do the 2-1, 3-2-1 buy downs. I mean, you can kind of craft it any way you want. There
Yeah,
are creative solutions.
creative.
And that's where instead of just going, well, obviously nobody wants to go from 3 to 7%. Yeah, duh. We all know that.
Right.
Now let's reach out to our lending partners and say, guys, give me a compelling argument that I can then bring to a buyer to say, here's how we're going to help this make more sense
Make
than
more sense.
it for yep.
And if they're afraid, oh, but the market, it's going to tank, it's going to go. We didn't go down where we are. Everybody was like, oh, prices are going to go down. We didn't go down at all, really. We actually went up. And so much of it is it's always supply and demand. No matter at the end of the day, I don't care where you are, what year it is, it's supply and demand. And the fact is, there was so little, and there were so many people who wanted to buy. Now, the other thing, too, on the buyer side is you've got to help them get over their fear. I'm going to buy and the market's going to tank, or, and they're so freaked out about the interest rates. And I love that line, marry the home, date the rate. It's a
Date the
great
rate.
line, date the rate, because that can change. But if you find something you love, and again, keep them focused on how long are they selling? I mean, how long are they living there? If they're going to flip this in 2 years, yeah, maybe not. But you're going to live there for the long haul.
Yeah.
Look at what show them historically what has happened and what always continues to happen, even back during the market crash. Look, I bought some properties when that happened, and some of in the buildings that my developers were selling because it was like they were giving things away. That was a very unusual time that I don't think we're ever going to see again.
And we probably won't see 3% interest rates ever again
Ever.
either, and it's okay. It
That's
was an
right.
anomaly. It was a
That's right.
reaction to COVID. It made
Yep.
sense at the moment, and
Right.
now we're a little bit hamstrung because
Yeah.
we have the, again, so it's tough right now. You have somebody who wants to sell their property for a premium,
Yeah,
or to recognize the upside that they've seen, and then yet, oh, where am I going to live next? And
yeah.
that is tricky. It's a tough part
It's
position to be in.
very tricky. The good thing is sometimes they're going into areas that are not, that the inventory isn't quite as low as it is here, you know? And then if sellers are like, and if they come to me, if sellers come to me in this kind of market and say, "Oh, I want to sell this off market," why would you, who benefits from that? I do, but they
Right.
certainly don't. There's so many buyers out there. There's so many buyers out there, and you want to get it out there. You want to get it out there and get it out there. And there's all kinds of, ways people are doing them. Doing that. I know some agents are underpricing a bit to get bidding wars, whatever your particular style is. But there are buyers out there. It's just managing their fear, managing
Yeah.
their fear, you
And
know?
and also, I suspect, Diana, that you have said this more than once, and I want to. I'm sort of making up the story in my head, and I'd like you to clarify or correct me if I'm wrong. But it's a really important one because right now agents want listings because listings we know sell very quickly. However, buying the next property for that couple, assuming they stay in the same market, looking for a comparable place or maybe a step up or a step down, depending on where they are in their life, can be very, very challenging. And I wonder how many times you have said to someone, we can sell your property in a day or two or very quickly because of the conditions of the market. What I'm worried about is not finding you the next place.
Right.
I suspect you have counseled people to say now maybe isn't the right time to
Yeah.
consider that.
Yeah.
And you've probably turned down business as a result. Um, I'm curious to hear, does that ever come into play, especially right now where you're like, we have to think about inventory. Yes, we can sell the property. Yes, go make a profit. I'm worried though about finding your next place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that definitely, if they don't see that there's a little bit of a stream, even if it's a small stream of things coming on the market, of things that they could possibly do and marry the home date, the rate, then maybe it isn't the right time. I think, and that's my point again, about you give people the right advice, you may not get that initial commission, but guaranteed, I've seen this so many times. They're coming back to you for years
Yeah.
and they're referring you. And
Yes.
I've always said never, it's just like how you treat other agents. I'm very known in the business and I'm very, very proud of the fact that I'm a really ethical agent. I know agents out there right now that block other agents from seeing the properties because they want
Wow.
to double it. We're getting a lot of that. They
Uh,
want to double end,
sure.
buy and sell side.
Sure.
And it's like you are literally destroying, you're going to need that other agent
Yep.
down the line. You are so short sighted because if you don't play nice in the sandbox, and it's one of the reasons so many of the developers came to me to do even the broker outreaches because they knew I had such good rapport with so many agents. They come to my, I do an open house. I mean, a broker's open. They're there. Do you know?
Yeah.
And they support you and they want to do business with you. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of kind of icky things that go on. You don't want to be part of that.
Yeah.
Always think long term, long term, have a much bigger vision. And that's exactly, it speaks to what you're talking about. Sometimes you've got to be patient and it may not be the right time, you know. If there's, I tell my clients all the time, in a stacked building, meaning a high rise that has a whole line of the exact same unit, if two or three come on the market at the same time, do not list now because it's supply and demand again. You're going to be competing with these two other people. Buyers know they can negotiate more in a situation like that.
Sure.
So I always encourage them, hang on, can you stay, can you rent for a year, whatever their possible options are. But you've got to be willing to not to let that immediate commission go,
Yeah.
or postpone it, or push it off a little bit. And then they trust you.
Yeah.
It's all about building trust. It really is.
Yeah. It is, and because it's such a huge financial decision. Whether it's somebody's first time buying a home or selling a home, or it's their fifth home. Either way, they are. This. We're talking about finances,
Oh
and you
yeah.
said something else about being in alignment, or being playing nice in the sandbox with other agents. I don't suspect our listeners struggle with this, because I just assume our podcast listeners are the nicest agents on the planet, and I'm sure they are. But sometimes, there's other agents out there who aren't so nice to us, and
Yeah.
in particular. And I hate to even say this, because I wish I wasn't saying it, but women get treated differently, sometimes by sometimes by male agents, sometimes by other female agents. But regardless, women can be treated differently as well. I have a very good friend here in Chicago, who's one of the top agents here. She's been nicest person you could ever possibly meet. And it's sort of like when we're together socially, she'll go, "You would not believe the way some men speak to me." And I'm like,
Oh,
as a man, I don't recognize that. So as men, anyone out there who's listening who is a man, really, really understand that women sometimes do not get talked to in the same way that
mm,
men are talked to, and it is not easy to be a woman, not easy to be a woman in general, but
yeah,
certainly not easy to be a woman realtor when men can talk down to women. So
yeah.
I'm curious, and when you see bad behavior out there happening to you, you probably experience it as well. How do you process that and move beyond it?
You know, I don't get that so much, but it could be because of how long I've been doing this, and people around here, for the most part, are aware of me, at least,
Yeah.
and my reputation. So I don't get that. So, but I did in the beginning. I did in the beginning. I actually will never forget this one agent saying, and he was an old timer in the business. He hardly ever did any business. And I came in, and, I guess he just assumed, maybe I was a hat check girl before. Who knows? But I remember one of my developers coming back to me and saying, "What a nasty man." He just said, "Oh, she just lucked into everything." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
I had to." It really bothered me at first,
Sure.
but I learned to let it roll off my back. And with developers, every now and then I'll get that kind of
Boys
attitude.
club kind of, yeah,
Boys
attitude.
club,
Yeah.
it can be a real, but I have always won them over. I've
Yeah.
always, with my knowledge, with my hard work, with making them making their project a success, and beyond what they ever thought. I mean, so many times I've outsold their performers, and they're like, "Oh my god, you're the best thing in sliced bread." And the fact is, sometimes you have to earn it, and I
Yeah.
kind of know that, and I have to just, okay, I'm going to buckle up and I'm going to show them, you
Yeah.
know and then they are completely the opposite. There was one of the big projects that I did. Every Wednesday we would have our big marketing meeting, and I was the only woman in there. And it got to be, and the person who was the regional director was so difficult. Everyone was terrified of him. Even his own sales team was terrified of him. And it got to the point we would walk into the meetings, the only person he ever talked to in there or asked questions of was me. And the
Wow.
whole meeting, he just felt it. And everybody else was kind of glad, because then they weren't in the line of fire. They were afraid, afraid, afraid. And I thought, I'm stepping up to this.
Yeah.
I'm jumping in the deep end. I'm going to come up with some great ideas. I'm going to do the work that he's asking me to do my research, think out of the box, throw out some ideas here. And he respected me for it. So you have to know your worth. You have to know your worth. and then you have to show them. And sometimes you just have to prove it.
Yeah.
I have somebody right now that from the very beginning, he had a really bad situation with a realtor prior to me. And it was so unfortunate because I knew I was going to have to undo some of that damage, in his mind with trust. And now it's completely the opposite. But it was painful for a few weeks. It was like, God, he questions everything I do. Does he really think I don't know what I'm talking about? And it was really, really hard, particularly after all the years I've done this. And I think if he would just trust me, we could get this done so much quicker and better, you know, and it took time. But I hung in there. Part of it is I like a challenge. Maybe that's it. I like a challenge, but we don't get as much. We have a lot of women here that do real estate. And a lot of the top ones are women, not all for sure, but a lot of them are incredibly intelligent women, and so good at what they do. And we all admire each other, male and female alike. I think the top agents always seem to kind of, usually, unless they're just so hyper competitive with you, they seem to, you know, we have mutual respect most of the
I
time.
I think that's because you all know the amount of skill and effort that
Yeah,
it takes
yeah,
to get to that level. Anyone can get there should they put in that amount of work and dedication.
right,
Very few will go that extra mile, and as a result, you're part of a community of people that have gone the extra mile. Now again, there's
right.
outliers. There's always the weird person at the top where you're like, I don't even
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that person.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the vast majority are like, we earn this spot. We like
Right,
that there's healthy competition. We also, by the way, are cooperating with each other. It is called a
right,
cooperative commission.
right.
And
That's
and
right.
so it is so important, interpersonal skills with other agents. If right now, especially when you're with buyers, so much competition because obviously there's inventory challenges in most markets. This is the time to really build those interpersonal skills, I think, between realtors,
Yeah,
because boy, you want somebody when they see your name on that offer to go,
yeah.
oh, I know Diana. She's great. This is legit.
Right. And you know what? You're laying out a course for your business to be so much easier. You make enemies out there. Let me tell, and we all know the agents we see on a listing, and we go, "Oh my God, this is gonna be a nightmare!" And they're gonna throw my offer in the trash, or they're gonna use it to go get their own. But we all know those agents, and you know what happens? Over time, people don't want to work with them.
Right.
They don't want to work with them because why would they waste their time, their clients' time? You never trust anything they say, and then the ones you see their name, man, this is a stand up person. We're going to literally be professional to professional. And it's
Yeah.
a joy doing it's a pleasure doing business with people like that. So that's why I'm saying don't chase after that one commission here or that one commission here. I've had agents that have done lousy things to me, I'm not going to go badmouth them, but when I see them coming, I'm kind of like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm not going to seek out working with them. Let's put it that way. And so it's incredibly important. We're here for the long term.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah,
I always think like whenever my somebody I'm calling, when the phone rings, and now of course it announces, we've had caller ID since the
yeah,
90s now,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so everyone knows the phone call, who it's from. And I always want, in any part of my life, whether it's my family, my friends, my work colleagues, my clients. I want when the phone rings, I don't want them to go, "Oh, DJ's calling me." I want them to go,
Oh,
"Hey," I
I know,
want to go, "Hey,
right,
DJ's
right,
calling. This is cool. Like he's probably
right,
got something
right.
fun and exciting to tell me,
Yeah,
or he cares about me." I want people to be pleasantly like I want them to see a smile on their face when
yeah, yeah,
they pick up the phone.
of course.
And if you can, not you, Diana, but if our listeners, if we can think about, as a realtor, there's always bumps in every transaction. There's always something that goes wrong in every single transaction. So there's
Right,
always going to be some point of tension or stress. And if you can still be, every time that, when you make those outbound phone calls to whether it's another agent, an attorney, a lender, loan
right.
officer, or your client, and if the other person's like, "Oh, I'm excited to pick up the phone,"
Yeah.
you're doing a good job.
That's right. And you sometimes have to be a mediator. We have to be mediators. We have to do conflict resolution.
Yep.
Sometimes between couples, members of a couple, we have to be therapists when they're sitting on the ledge, constantly. We're having to be therapists. And it's like, and it's part of the job. The other thing I will say is n- never be the smartest person in the room. Always keep learning. I am learning every single day, and I've thankfully, it's always been my personality. I'm like a sponge. I never want to be that person that's got to prove I know it all. I want to learn, 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 and I learn something every day. And I learn something from almost every deal that I do, you know? And I look at everybody as a team. My attorneys, my lenders, it's like teach me. The more I learn, the more I can serve my clients, and then I look like I
Absolutely.
know what I'm talking about because I do know what I'm talking about, right?
The thing that we didn't specifically talk about, but I think encompasses, Diana, your success has been passion. You clearly have a passion for what you do,
Yeah,
helping your clients. And again, this sounds a little bit like marketing speak, but I know everyone who has listened to this episode by now can hear the passion that comes through in the way in which you communicate. And so that is incredibly important, because passion is something that I think doesn't get spoken about enough in this industry. And again, because it's such a heavy emotional decision, whether somebody buys or sells a home, again, it's heavy financial decision, emotional decision, it's a stressful decision.
very.
Have somebody on your team who is passionate for you, the client,
Yeah,
having your best interests at mind, and being able, and it doesn't mean you have to be expressive. Everyone's different. Some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. There's different ways to express passion. It doesn't have to be in exactly Diana's style, but it works really well for Diana. But notice how authentic she is. She works hard, she sharpens her skills, she's constantly trying to improve all of these years later, and learn and continues to learn her numbers and the market. The passion for learning, I think, is really what I get the most. That what is probably the most I've gotten out of you, is this continual hunger for learning, 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 and I
yeah,
think that allows you to continue to grow. So I want to honor you for that. I also want to say to our audience, by the way, if there are agents out there who are in the Gold Coast area of New Jersey, Hoboken, um, uh, uh, what else? Sorry, Jersey City, Hoboken, up the Gold Coast. If
yeah,
you are an agent who is looking, this is the year of teams. This is the year of recruiting. This is the year where agents are moving around. This is a good time to explore other options. If you would like to possibly, see what other options exist, or if you think you could be of value to the Sutherlin Group, or maybe you would want to join forces with them, reach out to Diana and her team, and they can see if it might be a match. And also, by the way, if you're an agent in another area or another state, even, who have clients who, come and go, possibly moving into New York City, or obviously New Jersey. But Florida, a lot of people retire to Florida from New York City, of course, and other areas as well. If you have these feeder markets of going in and out,
mhm,
Diana would love the opportunity to partner with you to work with your clients as well. But Diana, if there is an agent in your area or someone that wants to work with you directly, what's the best way they should reach out to you?
Um, well, definitely you can email me at diana@sutherlingroup.com. And my spelling is unusual. It's Sutherlin group.com. They can absolutely reach out to me there. I'm actually interviewing somebody this afternoon. So, it or referrals. I love referrals. I send people back and forth, and that's another reason to have great relationships with agents. It's very important. They have to know that you are going to take such good care of their client, because it's their reputation on the line too. So referrals, anybody looking to possibly join a team, that maybe we can discuss whether it's a good fit. But thank you for that, DJ.
Well, thank you. This has been an incredible episode. You have said so much knowledge and wisdom and strategy. And I think more so than anything, just your overall presence is so in alignment with the only word that keeps coming to me is authentic. This authentic willingness to really want to help somebody make these financial these decisions around what they buy and sell and where they live. It really comes through in your energy, and I suspect is a big part of your success. And you are clearly into the end result for your client. You are on their team. You are their advocate, and you are listening and paying attention. So I love that, and that came through just perfectly, I think, today. So I think everyone learned a ton from you. And so if you are interested in working with Diana and her team, obviously you can reach out to her, sutherlandgroup.com. We will have a link to that in the show notes. Follow them on social media as well. Sutherlin Group, we'll have a link to that as well, so you don't have to write it down. And also, Diana, on behalf of our listeners, thank you for your time. We know just how busy you are, with all of the different groups that you work with, developers, clients, your own team members. Thank you for your time today. And also on behalf of Diana and myself, we want to thank our listeners for continuing to
You.
support our
Yes.
show. Yeah, thanks for sticking around to the very end. Please support our sponsors. Please tell one friend about this episode, just one other agent that is maybe struggling, or maybe somebody that goes, I would like to start to work with developers, or just I want to be more connected to my sphere of influence. Send them a link to this episode, and that will help them. So just tell one friend in your office about this episode. We would appreciate it, and also leave us a review if you, whether you like us or not. We love feedback, so please tell us how you're finding these episodes, so we can continually improve for you. Diana, thank you so much for being on the
So
show.
much,
We
DJ.
are honored to have you, Diana Sutherlin. Amazing, total superstar, rock star in New Jersey and New York City as well. Diana, thank you so much. We will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you. Okay. Take care.